Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, and thank you for your interest. You're joining us for the informational webinar for applicants and other interested parties for the Bioenergy Technologies Incubator 2 Funding Opportunity Announcement, or FOA, which was issued last week on August 27, 2015. This FOA number is DE FOA 0001320. My name is Prasad Gupta, and I'm a technology manager in the Bioenergy Technologies Office within the DOE's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and I'll be leading this webinar. We hope to cover the basic aspects of this funding opportunity announcement during this webinar. And before we begin, I'd like to just draw your attention to the email address on the left-hand side of the cover page of your screen there. This is the official mailbox to direct all of your questions during the entire FOA process, including any questions that arise from today's webinar. All the questions that we receive at this mailbox are posted publicly at the Q&A section of the FOA page on EERE Exchange in an anonymous way. The official answers to your questions will typically be posted within 3 business days of the initial email. Please be careful not to submit any language that might be business sensitive, proprietary, or confidential. And just to be clear, there are no particular advantages or disadvantages to the application evaluation process with respect to participating in this webinar today. Your participation today is completely voluntary, and it's just informational, and it's really more to help folks. And I'll mention this at the end, but we'll also be posting this webinar and these slides on our website. So let's get started. So all applicants are encouraged to read the FOA. You probably have already. And this presentation, again, summarizes the contents of the FOA. So we've tried to make sure that this presentation essentially reflects what's in the actual FOA. The FOA is the controlling document, and if there are any consistencies, please let us know. You can seek clarification, but if you have any questions about it, again, go ahead and email us at betoincubator2@ee.doe.gov. So let me just cover the agenda. I'm going to give a brief overview of the background for the incubator, this incubator program. I'll then dive into the FOA description in a little bit more detail. I'll describe the award information, what we're hoping to seek from interested parties. I'll talk a little bit about the concept paper process, and then the full application process, and then how we will do the merit review and selection of both the concept papers and the full applications. I'll also just briefly touch upon the replies to reviewer comments, which is part of the selection process. And then towards the end, we'll sort of discuss some of the mechanics of actually being able to apply, and those are, that's the registration requirements. And I'll describe sort of the statement of substantial involvement, which is a part of what this FOA is about, and I'll describe some of the cost-sharing requirements for this FOA. And again, if you have a copy of the FOA in front of you, that's also that might be helpful for reference as we do this presentation. And again, the slides will be posted on our website. So I thought it might be helpful to sort of give a background on the incubator as it relates to the programs within the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy has many programs to support research, development, and demonstration, and it's helpful to put these programs in context to better understand the intent and purpose of this particular FOA, this incubator FOA. So on the left, you can see the Office of Science, and they're primarily focused on funding fundamental research. The ARPA-E program funds high-risk, high-reward, transformational, and disruptive R&D, and as many of you are probably already aware, they recently had an open solicitation, and they also had where bioenergy was one of the topics. And then sort of to the right of ARPA-E, as we kind of go down the continuum of RD&D, are the applied programs within DOE. And DOE's applied programs primarily reside in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, or EERE, And the Bioenergy Technologies Office, or BETO, is a part of EERE, and it's one of the 10 offices within EERE. So where BETO, EERE is sort of to the right, where you see the applied programs part of it. You can read sort of the bullets of kind of what we're interested in versus what some of the other offices within DOE are interested in. So just kind of continuing this, and sort of another way of putting this, this is kind of a busy slide, but I thought it was helpful. This is a slide that Dr. Danielson, the Assistant Secretary for EERE, has used in the past to communicate how EERE operates. And so as you can see, EERE, the goal of EERE is to identify high-impact opportunity areas that sort of arise from the fundamental science that our other sister offices within DOE have previously funded, to identify these areas, then to then create aggressive long-term cost reduction goals, and then implement that into targeted multi-year program plans and roadmaps. And we seek to update these on a regular basis. So we're really where we're at in this FOA. The goal of this FOA is to identify technologies that can sort of feed into that top left corner where the first blue diamond is, and sort of where that number 1 is, where technology has potential to yield cost-effective benefits. Really what we're seeking is to sort of feed this pipeline, and then the goal of EERE and BETO is to sort of de-risk the technologies down this curve to improve cost performance over time. And now this is the final slide on background that I'll give, this is our mission, strategy, and performance goals for our office, the Bioenergy Technologies Office, or BETO. So again, our mission is to accelerate the commercialization of advanced biofuels and bioproducts through R&D of new technologies supported by public and private partnerships. So I'll just kind of go now into the FOA description here. So as I previously alluded to, BETO has developed a multi-year program plan that identifies many of the technical barriers that need to be overcome to meet the mission and goals of the program. And periodically we issue targeted FOAs to address these barriers. We do recognize, however, that there may be some very novel and potentially disruptive ideas that do not necessarily satisfy the requirements of any specific FOA, yet still could meet our goal and mission. And so the goal of this program is to identify these potentially impactful ideas that are not meaningfully addressed in our current multi-year program plan or our project portfolio. It is not intended to fund projects that are incremental improvements to current products or processes, or for established work in BETO's MYPP plan or current portfolio. And these are underlined, they're hyperlinked actually, and I've provided the links for your reference, where you can access our multi-year program plan, and you can access our current portfolio as was presented in a recent peer review in March of this year, where I think over 99% of our portfolio was represented in that peer review. So that's our goal. So we have 2 topical areas, or areas of interest. Topic 1 is for algae feedstocks R&D, and so this is open to all proposals that develop novel, non-incremental technologies that facilitate the goals of the algae feedstocks R&D platform that are not represented in a significant way in the current project portfolio. And topic area 2 is focused on terrestrial feedstock supply logistics and conversion R&D. And again, we're seeking proposals that seek to develop novel, non-incremental technologies that are not represented in a significant way in the current portfolios for terrestrial feedstocks and conversion R&D. What we are not interested in are obviously sort of applications that are not based on sound scientific principles. That's sort of our mom and apple pie statement. But we're also not interested in too early of a stage, so we're really not looking for exploratory basic science projects, and we're really not looking for later stage demonstration and deployment phase projects. So many of you are familiar with the TRL levels or technology readiness levels, we're really looking for the sweet spot of around 2 to 4. And we're really not interested in applications that seek to use food or feed carbohydrates, lipids, or proteins. Basically, we're looking for cellulosic or algae feedstocks for any R&D to be developed. Sort of continuing this for algae, for topic 1, applications specifically not of interest. Recovery of nutrients from conversion and recycle back to cultivation, operation of national testbed facilities, development of cultivation and harvest processing technology and the integration of developed technologies at field scales, development, characterization, and valorization of finished fuels and bioproducts from algal biomass, and technologies for algae crop protection. Now, the reason these are here is that these were the subjects of previous algae FOAs, and again, the point of the incubator FOA is to develop and identify technologies that have not been identified in previous FOAs. And this is straight from the FOA. So for applications specifically not of interest for topic area 2, and again, this is straight from the FOA. I'll just, rather than, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read everything out. This is directly taken from the FOA, but you can sort of read this at your leisure. Again, these concepts and these attributes were embedded in previous FOAs, and so is the reason why these are applications specifically not of interest for this FOA. And for your reference, I included recent BETO FOAs in this area, so you can see these are the last 3 FOAs we had for the algae platform. These are the last 2 FOAs we had for the feedstock logistic platform, and these are the last FOAs that we had in the conversion platform. And so we've also included many workshops and events that we've had. They may be useful for you to identify areas of research that you're interested in further developing. So the award information that we have for this particular FOA, we have up to $10 million in funding. Of course, that's subject to the availability of appropriated funds. We anticipate making awards that range from $1 to $2 million. These will be cooperative agreements, and I'll cover what I'll describe the cooperative agreements in the subsequent slides. We expect these proposals to be ranging from 12 to 24 months, 1 to 2 years. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we're targeting kind of earlier TRL levels. There is a cost share requirement. It's 10% for universities, nonprofits, and federally funded research and development centers, and it's 20% of total project costs otherwise. Again, the FOA spells out in much greater detail what those requirements are and what the specifics of those are. So who's eligible to apply? Individuals, domestic entities, foreign entities, unincorporated consortia, unincorporated FOA, and again, please look at the FOA for specific eligibility requirements. Okay, so let's talk about the timeline here. So the FOA has already been, and this is also mentioned in the first page of the FOA. So where we're at right now is hopefully you're at the point where you're developing concept papers. We'd like to then point out that we're going to be reviewing these concept papers, and we'll be giving an encourage or a discourage, a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and we're targeting in the early October timeframe for that. I'll refer to this later, but I'll mention it now. The encourage or discourage notification is meant to really convey our best thoughts as to what the competitiveness of that idea is, and it's meant. And discourage notifications are meant to really save applicants time and money. The full applications, I realize, take a significant amount of resources to develop, and it's just our way of conveying that that these ideas are less likely to be competitive. Of course, you are still eligible to submit a full application. However, you do have to submit a concept paper to be able to submit a full application. So the full application will be due sometime in mid-November, and then once we get that, we will be doing our evaluation and selection. We will allow you to see some of the reviewer comments on that, and we will allow you the opportunity to respond to that. We'll also make a comment on this later, but the point of the reply to reviewer comments is primarily to clarify anything that's been raised from the reviewer comments. It is not meant to convey new material, and new material will not be evaluated. It's only meant to sort of address and to clarify concerns or questions. We hope to make notifications in the early 2016 timeframe, and then make the awards by the spring timeframe. So concept papers, again, applicants must submit a concept paper. You may submit multiple concept papers, provided that each concept paper is a unique, scientifically distinct concept. It must include a technology description, and we'll get into the mechanics of what are the requirements of the concept paper. Again, you can refer to section 4C of the FOA. It's limited to 2 pages with a 1-page addendum. We are looking for a fairly short turnaround on this, within 3 weeks. 9/21, that's in red for a reason, by 5 p.m. Eastern Time through EERE Exchange. As I mentioned earlier, we will be giving you either an encourage or a discourage notification, and some comments about that. And again, a discourage notification is meant to really save you time and money and resources on that. So here are the concept paper criteria. So there are 3 criteria. The first is the extent to which this proposed approach or solution that you're conceiving is new to the BETO portfolio. We're really looking for a clear description of the specific problem barrier that the proposed technology will address, and a concise description of the key idea of the proposed technology, and then the extent to which the proposed idea is new or not represented in a significant way within the BETO portfolio. Related to that is the overall technical merit. How innovative and how unique is this? And are there any major, we would like to make sure that there are no major technical flaws. Have you not overlooked some key things? And then, so it's got to be new, it's got to be innovative, but it also has to have impact. And so describe the impact. How would we know that this will actually achieve our goal of producing cost-competitive and sustainable advanced biofuels and bioproducts? How does this move the state of the art of the industry? If this is successful, who would care and why? These are the kinds of things that we're looking at in the concept paper. So then the full application will then include the technical volume, the SF-424 application, the SF-424A budget justification, an abstract for release, a summary slide, and there's some administrative documents as well. Again, these are all laid out in the FOA itself. So what are we looking for in the technical volume? Cover page, an overview, a description of the technology, the innovation and the impact, the R&D work plan that will accomplish the goals set out in the description, and then the qualifications and resources of the team. So again, you must have the date for the full applications will be November 13th. You must be an eligible entity. you must have submitted an eligible concept paper, and you must meet the cost share requirements. You must have put in all the necessary documents as laid out in the FOA, and that it is responsive to the FOA, that it's not in the areas of non-interest. And again, refer to Section 3 for the eligibility requirements. And so what we'll do when we receive the full applications is just to make sure that you've checked all the boxes, that this is eligible, and we'll do the technical review. We will do a technical review with reviewers that are experts in the subject matter of the FOA. Just a comment about the independent reviewers. We have a very thorough conflict of interest evaluation to ensure that the independent reviewers who are reviewing these are vetted and both are subject matter experts, but also have no conflicts. And we review that with our legal counsel to ensure that's the case. We take that part very seriously. Once we have that independent review, we will then incorporate other aspects such as program policy factors to make the final selection decisions, and I'll touch upon that later on. Okay. So here are the evaluation criteria for the full applications. So the first criteria is technical innovation, technical merit, innovation, and impact. Half of the score. Then it's the project research and commercialization plan. It's 40% of the total score, and then the team and resources is 10%. And again, this is laid out in the FOA itself. So just talking a little bit more about it, the technical merit and innovation, again, the extent to which it's clearly described, the extent to which the description is novel and innovative, and the extent to which you've provided sufficient detail to let us make that assessment. And then for the impact of the technology is how does this move the state of the art, and to what extent does this actually contribute to the goals of developing cost-competitive, sustainable, advanced biofuels and bioproducts. Criteria 2 is the project research and commercialization plan. So, how well have you described the critical path to accomplishing the goals? How well described are the task descriptions? How well have you identified the technical risks that are involved with this? And how well have you identified the mitigation strategies to address these? Continuing on the project research and commercialization plan, how well have you identified the current baseline of where your current technology is and where you hope to go? And are your milestones, metrics, deliverables, are they written in a way that can enable meaningful review of progress? How do we know that we're accomplishing the goals? And then finally, where's this going? We're fundamentally a research organization, but at the end of the day, this has to get to market. Who will do what with the technology that you've developed? So have you identified the target market? Have you identified other competitors or other approaches to this? How well have you identified who's going to take this technology to the next level? And then finally, we're looking at the quality of the team. Who's going to be doing this? What does each partner, what does each investigator bring to the table in terms of their qualifications as it relates to the innovations that are proposed in your project? What level of how committed are the PIs on this? And does the budget make sense for what you are trying to do and what you hope to accomplish? And again, we will provide applicants with the comments from our independent reviewers. you're not required to submit a reply. And as I mentioned earlier, the opportunity to reply to reviewer comments is really meant to clarify any points raised in the reviewer comments. We will disregard the discussion of any new information that's not originally included in the application. Selection factors. So after the independent review is done, we will also incorporate some program policy factors in the amount of funding in arriving at the selections for the FOA. And so some of the selection factors are listed in the FOA, but there are a large number of program policy factors, so I just wanted to highlight a few. The degree to which this project optimizes the use of available EERE funding. At the end of the day, EERE is a steward of taxpayer funding, and we want to make sure that this is the best use of our limited resources. We want to make sure that this project can lead to increased employment and manufacturing in the U.S. We want to make sure that there's diversity within our portfolio of projects, and so that's another aspect that we're looking at. And again, this is the incubator FOA. We are looking for, kind of circling back to what I originally was talking about in terms of what the goal of this particular FOA is again, how would this help our office incorporate kind of new ideas into our program plan. And again, there are a few additional program policy factors. They are described in the FOA. So to register, to apply for this FOA, you must register and submit an application through EERE Exchange. You're probably already familiar with that because you're on this webinar. But again, here's the website for this, and here are all the here are some of the key websites that you need to go to register for. Some of you probably may have already done so. Again, all concept papers, full applications, replies to reviewer comments are submitted through EERE Exchange. That is the medium of communication. We will not accept any emails or paper mail. It is solely through this website. Please check at EERE Exchange about to ensure that your submissions actually went through. So please give yourself a few days just to avoid any potential glitches. We've seen this many times before. At the very end of the day, at the very end of the deadline, it's a robust website. However, give yourself the opportunity so that you're not clogging the server at the very end. So if you can submit it in advance, that would be to your benefit. And it's important to just designate a primary point of contact if there are, so that when we get to the point where we need to contact you about certain aspects of the proposal, or if we need to clarify certain things, or if we need to start to engage in the award negotiations for the selections, that we know who to contact. And it's important that you sort of be responsive to this when we're ready to, once we're done with the project selections and we're ready to start the award negotiation process. And your failure to do so may result in the cancellation of further awards negotiations. So so I alluded to earlier that EERE will be the mechanism for financial assistance that EERE will be providing for this particular FOA is through a cooperative agreement, and a cooperative agreement entails substantial involvement from DOE, from BETO. And so really what that means is we are partners with the recipient for the management, the control, the direction, the performance of the project. We want to make sure that the performance of this project is consistent with our programmatic focus, and we will have the opportunity to modify or interrupt if the project is going off target. And again, we want to continue to we want to have the opportunity to redirect or discontinue the funding based on the outcome of the project at critical stage gates or go, no-go decision points. And we expect to be involved in major project decision making for the project once selected. So for cost share, applicants must contribute a minimum of 20% of the total project costs. The contributions must be specified in the budget, and this is something that will be reviewed as part of the project selection process. There is a cost share waiver for universities, nonprofits, and federally funded research and development centers that so that where it goes from 20% to 10% of the total project costs. These are the regulations that that provide for the federal cost principles. So these Code of Federal Regulations have all the specifics of what constitutes allowable cost share. And they may be submitted by the prime recipient, subrecipients, or third party. In-kind contributions are described here. The personnel and direct costs. There's the FOA and the CFR have much more in-depth description of what constitute, again, allowable cost shares. Unallowable cost shares are revenues from prospective operations of an activity beyond the project period. You can go ahead and read this. This is something that will be evaluated as part of the project evaluation. It's important that recipients provide the documentation of cost share throughout the award. So we expect that as the project proceeds forward, that the project is contributing at an appropriate rate throughout the process, throughout the time frame of the project. And we'll want to just, from time to time, and when it makes sense or if there's a concern, we'll ask for additional clarification as needed. If you have any questions about this FOA, please email BETO Incubator2 at ee.doe.gov. We will post all questions on EERE Exchange with our response to that. If you have any questions with EERE Exchange, they're a very helpful and very responsive group of folks. Their email is included on this, but please include the FOA name and the number in the subject line, as EERE has many FOAs running concurrently. And a digital copy of the slides and this webinar will be posted on EERE Exchange and the BETO website following today's webinar. And I realize that this slide deck is already incorrect. I made a comment about the concept papers being limited to 2 pages. They're actually limited to 3 pages with a 1-page addendum. So again, that was in the FOA, and again, the FOA is the governing document. So again, the concept papers are limited to 3 pages with 1 page of addendum. We will make this clear. We will update the slides that will be posted so that it accurately reflects the FOA. Thank you. Good luck and best wishes.